What was the first Sheridan le Fanu story you ever read? It was the Carmilla, was it?
It was Carmilla, yes. That was the first one. Because we read it with Bram Stoker, basically, I think. I was studying vampire in literature. I studied it in school like years ago. Not high school, but not college. It's not the same terms in France, but basically... We had books with a special edition when you could read a few things around the novel. And apparently, I don't know if it came from the daughter of Le Fanu, but apparently, well, the death of his wife was really something that broke him. But in the same time, he was in these sort of trance and pains of writing Carmilla. It was like writing this story was bringing him a lot of sufferance, but he had to. So he had these moments of fever when he had to wake up at night and write and write and write.
Do you think it was something to do with like a kind of therapy for him, perhaps?
I don't know. He actually, apparently, was very sick, and he has. He was kind of a matured man, but with a lot of complications like sickness. I try to remember which ones, but he had these moments, these nights when he was like in a sort of fever, and he had to write. He was pained by this, but he needed to. It was not physical pain. But writing the story of Carmilla itself, it was kind of really hard to write.
Yeah, because he was going through all of this. Yeah, which, again, he was an admirer of Wilkie Collins, and Wilkie Collins went through something similar with the Moonstone.
Really?
Yes, he'd just lost his mother, and he'd suffered a long time from rheumatic gout, so he was on laudanum quite a lot.
Wow.
Plus, all the depression, losing his mother. And then on top of it all, he had one of these religious characters visiting him very persistently. So he took revenge by creating the character of Miss Clack, who was based on this rather impertinent visitor.
Wow.
There were actually two evangelical women who, on discovering Wilkie's unmarried relationship with Caroline Graves, decided to leave religious tracts for him wherever he would find them, urging repentance.
But again, he was writing The Moonstone, which is like, these are the top detective novel of the era, and it's been, ever since. It's a brilliant novel, I think. It's one of my favourites.
It's considered as one of his best, isn't it?
It's one of the big four, isn't it? The Woman in White, Moonstone, No Name, and Armadale. And the Moonstone was like, it's so well plotted, and all of the characterization is so brilliant. It introduces us to one of the first detectives in fiction, and it's really? Just and to think, he managed to write all of this under extreme stress, with all of this going on. So very similar to Le Fanu.
Wow. I thought Sherlock Holmes would be from one of the detectives. Sounds very daft from me.
Well, Wilkie Collins introduced Sergeant Cuff in, let's think now, 1870s? Is that when The Moonstone was? So if you think Conan Doyle started writing Sherlock Holmes in the, 1880s, 1890s, and carried on, with an interval. So I think there's about 20, 30 years difference between them.
Wow. So yeah, they were quite contemporary writers in a sense.
Conan Doyle would have been familiar with Wilkie Collins's work, I think, growing up and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's about 20 years difference, I would say.
Funny enough, speaking of suffering in pain, well, I'm gonna go back to French authors, but Maupassant, when you read some of his novels, like I don't know if you read the Horla, with that.
Oh yes.
He had the story of a man who apparently feels there is a presence there he can't see, who doesn't have any form, but that torments him. And he had these visions because he was going to madness, because he had, he had syphilis.
Oh.
Yeah. And so he was getting into madness. He knew he was losing his mind. And in the rare moments of lucidity he was writing about this feeling, these struggles through the Orla.
Yeah, so there's that twist, that turn of the screw, to quote another ghostwriter.
I try to remember another writer who was like talking to his characters. For me, I have another French author.
Dickens.
Yes. Oh, Dickens, because Balzac was doing it as well at the end of his life.
Do you mean talking out loud to his characters?
Yes, he was like speaking to them, or believe he was one of them. I need to check. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that'd be interesting. Okay, you need to go and check that out, and maybe we'll do a little episode on Balzac and his characters. We could maybe compare them with Charles Dickens.
I didn't know Charles Dickens was actually.
Maybe not to the same extent as Balzac, but certainly his characters are very, very vivid. And there's a painting, an unfinished, or I think it's unfinished painting in colour of him snoozing. He's having a nap, and all of his characters are sort of floating around him, and he's kind of dreaming them.
Wow.
Yeah, but he lived in that. They certainly, I think, were quite real and vivid for him.
Oh.
Dickens's Dream is an unfinished painting of Dickens asleep, surrounded by his characters, and was painted by Robert William Buss in 1875.
Have you seen the movie called The Man Who Invented Christmas?
I did go and see that. Yeah. I've forgotten a lot of it.
There is a moment when he creates Scrooge and Marley, and he's actually talking to them, especially to Scrooge, I think. I have a feeling like, do you know the character in David Copperfield? There is I think it's Mr. Nickleby.
Nickleby.
Yeah, is he not inspired by Dickens' father?
Yes, the Eternal Optimist.
Yeah, I really love Nickleby. He's one of my favorites, even though I know he's probably a sort of, if you met him in person, I don't know what you think of him, but I really love him. He has this warmth, and
he is so relentlessly optimistic, yes, and positive, and so on, and that goes a long way, doesn't it? Yes, yeah. But it might get very, very stressful if you're at the receiving end of all of his bad luck. Yes, but we have to keep positive. Why you are going into the debtor's prison? What do you mean?
Oh my God.
George Henry Lewis, perhaps best remembered as George Eliot's soulmate, was a philosopher and literary critic who once wrote of Dickens. Dickens once declared to me that every word said by his characters was distinctly heard by him. I was at first not a little puzzled to account for the fact that he could hear language so utterly unlike the language of real feeling and not be aware of its preposterousness. But the surprise vanished when I thought of the phenomena of hallucination. George Henry Lewis, Dickens in Relation to Criticism, Fortnightly Review, February 1872.
So I'm looking on the sources for Carmilla, forgetting the R.
Why did he put the R in there? Why is it Carmilla, not Camilla? Nobody knows. Another mystery. We're going to find out.
Carmilla is an anagram of Milarca, and both these names are anagrams of Mircalla, the original vampiric Countess Carstein, whose true identity is revealed later in the story, hence the R in Carmilla. Simples, really.
So as with Dracula, critics have looked for the sources used in writing Carmilla. One source is from a dissertation on magic, vampires, and apparition of spirits, written by Dom Augustin Calmet, entitled Traité sur les apparitions des esprits et des vampires ou revenant de Hongrie, de Moravie, etc., 1751. So it's like a report based on vampiric legends. Well, it's one of the sources probably say it might have been used.
Ah, okay.
They said also about a book written by Reverend Sabine Baring Gould, the Book of Werewolves,
Wow.
and an account of Elizabeth Bathory.
Oh,
Bathory.
yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, this one is one of the most evident, I think, because she's one of the
Yeah.
main inspiration, and I mean the legends, how she get to these terrible practices of dark magic. I mean, an unknown man dressed in black, coming to her home and talking about magic.
Countess Elizabeth Bathory, 1560 to 1614, was a Hungarian noblewoman of considerable power and property. Her reputation as a serial killer has been challenged over time, and her trial regarded by some historians as a witch hunt. Her subsequent imprisonment at the castle of Chechie may have been more to do with how much land her family possessed than whether she actually killed anyone. According to legend, the Countess and 4 of her servants tortured and killed hundreds of young women between 1590 and 1610, although the actual number may have been exaggerated. Many other legends were added to the canon after her death, including the myth that she bathed in the blood of virgins to retain her youth. While there is little evidence found to support the accusations, the legends surrounding the Blood Countess informed Gothic literature of the 18th and 19th centuries. There is one curious detail from her childhood, however. Elizabeth Bathory appears to have suffered from epilepsy. In those times, the treatment included rubbing the blood of a non-sufferer on the lips of the epileptic. Is it too much of a stretch to make a connection between this and her later reputation?
I have to check with a Stoker, but it looks like they were writing about reports most of the time. I mean, probably for Carmilla there is Bathory, and for Stoker there was the Vlad Tepes, like the original Dracula.
Did you know there was a theory put forward that Carmilla is actually illustrating a backstory of political anxiety? The theory is that Sheridan le Fanu, as an Anglo-Irish, was worried about the rising power of the Catholic Irish nationalists.
What?
Yeah. So according to this theory, so this is from Robert Tracy, and he writes in his introduction to Le Fanu's In a Glass Darkly in 1999. So Laura and her father, the main characters in Carmilla, represent the diminishing Anglo-Irish landowners whose abandoned village suggests Ireland after the Great Famine, 1845 to 1849. The people have been removed by what Laura's father calls the infection of superstition, their fear of vampires, a recollection of the fever that accompanied the famine. Many have chosen exile. So that's from the 1999 edition, introduction to In a Glass Darkly by Robert Tracy. So I think that's quite an interesting idea. You know, another possible reason that he wrote Carmilla.
Wow, I would never have guessed. It's brilliant.
It's interesting thought, isn't it? And then when you look back on the story after reading that, and then things start to fall into place and think, yes, that could be. You've got the 2 different locations. We have where Laura lives with her father, and then there's the outer abandoned village, and you start to see the parallels. You start to see how it could be. Okay, more trivia. What was Sheridan le Fanu's nickname?
Ah, I don't know.
He would write at night by the light of 2 candles, doze off, wake up at 2 a.m., make himself some strong tea, which I suspect is where the story for green tea came from, and write again for a couple of hours. And when he ran out of ideas, or perhaps just in order not to run out of ideas,
Dublin booksellers became accustomed to see him just before nightfall, where he would emerge like an apparition from the shadows and ask with his pleasant voice and smile, "Any more ghost stories for me?"
And they gave him the nickname the Invisible Prince.
That's quite poetic.
It's nice, isn't it? Yeah.
1870.
Oh, and the different photographs. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like a ghostly figure at the end of his life.
Yeah. Well, he kind of vanished from society. So this idea of him coming out of the shadows at night and coming out and saying, "Have you got any more ghost stories for me?"
I can
The
imagine.
Invisible Prince. You sort of want to think, well, isn't he the Prince of Darkness at the same time? You know, is this where Stoker got another idea from for Dracula?
I can imagine the publisher. So I'm gonna look at Carmilla because by reflex I look at the French wiki or at the French pages, but I'm gonna look at the British one because it's going to be more furnished. Dr. Eselius.
Yeah, I love those stories. I love the green tea, and there's about 3 of them, isn't it? The judge.
Was there a novel, a short story called The Monkey, or was it in actually green tea?
The monkey appeared. The phantom monkey is in green tea.
Right. Yes.
And it sort of manifests. Yes, and they sort of try and make a connection with drinking, lots of green tea, which does, if you have enough of it, it can apparently produce hallucinatory effects. I mean, it's very strong, high in caffeine, and so it can just keep you awake. I'm not so sure about but I have heard about the hallucinations being used as a plot detail.
Really, for caffeine?
Well, tea has theine, caffeine. It's, that's why you ask for decaf tea if you don't want to have,
Yes.
I can feel it, actually. I can feel a reaction to real tea leaves as opposed to decaffeinated. Creates a reaction in the stomach, and you can feel it. You can feel the difference between that and if you have decaffeinated tea, for example. So very often I'll just have hot water. Thank you. No milk.
Funny enough, well, it probably has nothing to do with it. But when you go to South America, the coca leaves.
Yeah.
They do basically these teas that just, it helps to appease, when you suffer from headaches due to the altitude.
Oh, yes.
And there is this strange feelings also when you just eat the coca leaves. Well, it's okay, it's not a drug, I know, but you have this feeling of sort of, how can I say this? Relaxed way. When you eat it, you have this feeling of like you were slightly asleep, in a way.
Yeah.
It's kind of a strange feeling, though. It doesn't have any vision things or such, but I think it affects the blood pressure in a way, because the feeling is like you are a bit slightly. Is it dormant? The right word?
Yeah.
Under a sleep in a way.
A dormant is something that can lie dormant. It's sleeping. So perhaps dormant, dozy.